Hey everyone, Jared here from Truck Safe Consulting. Believe it or not, the most common hours of service violations discovered by law enforcement during roadside inspections are not substantive violations such as exceeding the 11 or 14-hour limits, but instead violations that stem from the driver's inability to properly use his or her electronic logging device. In most cases, these are issues that are easily corrected with just a little instruction on the functionality of these devices. So in this video, we're going to discuss a few of these issues and how to address them so that you can avoid these types of violations in future roadside inspections. In particular, we're going to address the following items: utilizing the ELD's roadside inspection mode, how to access the device's instructions and transfer manual, how to display the ELD screen to law enforcement during a roadside inspection, how to transfer logs to law enforcement, form and manner violations, and what specific information must be entered on the ELD device each day, how to review and accept unidentified driving time, how to properly log personal conveyance, and how to properly power up and down the ELD device. So let's get to it. Roadside inspections can be nerve-wracking, and it's easy to get flustered when an officer's asking questions and demanding various items. With that in mind, it's important that drivers have a game plan or checklist they follow in the event they are stopped for an inspection. An important part of that game plan is ensuring you understand the process of getting hours of service data over to the officer. Now that ELDs are required for most operations, officers will generally expect drivers to understand the functionality of their devices and how to transfer required information. While no two ELDs are alike, most devices include a roadside inspection mode, which is an important tool that gives drivers easy access to all of the ELD data that they'll need in the event of a roadside inspection. We recommend that drivers enter this inspection mode as a matter of course each time they are stopped for an inspection, as it makes it much easier to access the required information.
So now we're going to show you how to enter inspection mode. First thing to do is enter the hours of service tab if you're not already in it. And then you will navigate to the day log tab. And then within that tab, you'll see the inspector mode clearly labeled at the bottom. So you just enter the inspector mode, and now you're in inspection mode, which is the mode we recommend you be in for a roadside inspection. Here you'll be able to see what the officer is able to see roadside, including the header tab, which lists information about your particular load, including some of the fields that are required, like the carrier name and DOT number, and also some of the other fields like shipping ID and trailer number, which can get you in trouble if they're not shown. So we'll talk about it later, but it's important that you have these tabs or these data points filled in. And then moving on here, we'll show you the graph grid view that an officer would use to look at your current day's record of duty status and then the previous 8 days worth here. And so he or she is able to tell if you're in violation of any of the substantive hours of service rules. Here's the log certification status screen, which shows the various logs that you've certified. So it's important that you certify each day's log after you've finished the day. Here's another screen showing where required information about a particular load is shown, so the officer may write you up for a violation. And here's a summary tab that's just showing where you stand on your various substantive hours of service rules.
Some of the most common ELD-related violations that we see come out of roadside inspections are the driver's inability to produce to the officer a copy of the ELD's instruction manual and transfer manual. What many drivers fail to realize is that in most cases, these manuals are available to them electronically on the ELD device itself.
So we're going to show you a couple different ways to access the user manual on this particular device. The first option is the easiest. Press this question mark on the bottom of the home page, and that'll take you right to the user manual. And the second is to just navigate to it by pressing the over button and then clicking on the user manual icon. Now, one thing to note on this particular device is that in terms of the transfer instructions, these are a little bit buried in this particular device. So here we're just showing that these instructions are also available in paper format, which we recommend you have in the vehicle with you.
Another fairly common ELD-related violation that we see has to do with the officer's inability to see the ELD screen from outside the vehicle. Some drivers mistakenly believe that since they will be electronically transferring their ELD data to an officer, the officer won't actually need to see the device itself. But this isn't always correct. The regulations require that drivers be able to electronically transfer their logs during an inspection and allow the officer to view the graph grid logs on the screen itself. So with that in mind, drivers need to be prepared to allow officers to view the screens of their device during an inspection. And in this regard, the regulations say that the screen needs to be visible to the officer from a reasonable distance while outside the vehicle. Now, in most cases, your ELD screen will be mounted to your dash or windshield, in which case you'll need to be prepared to temporarily remove the device and hand it over to law enforcement out the window so that he or she can view the device. Again, we recommend the device be placed in inspection mode before handing it over to the officer.
So here we're going to demonstrate how to physically display the screen to law enforcement during an inspection. First things first here, we got to get out of driving status and into on duty, not driving status. And here you could see that we're just making an annotation that we are undergoing a roadside inspection at this point, which we think is good practice. And so once that is in place and the annotation is in place, then here we're going to demonstrate once again how to enter inspection mode. So now that it's in inspection mode, we can go ahead and get ready to remove the device from its cradle. And then once that's done, it's just a matter of ensuring you have enough cable pulled out so that you can physically hand the device to the officer to view from a reasonable distance outside of the vehicle. So here we've got enough cable. Now we can move over to the seat and hand the device to the officer to view outside the vehicle.
Now that we've discussed how to display your ELD device to law enforcement during an inspection, let's talk about the process of electronically transferring your ELD data to law enforcement. Again, it's pretty common for drivers to be cited for their inability to transfer logs to law enforcement during an inspection, so it's important you know how to do so. In this regard, we recommend you spend some time reviewing the transfer manual that we discussed a little earlier, which should provide a step-by-step instruction for how to transfer logs.
So let's take a look at how to electronically transfer logs by looking at the instruction sheet for this particular device. So the first step you'll see is that you need to be in day log mode by clicking that tab at the upper portion of the screen. And then if you're still in inspector mode, as you should have been when handing the device over to the officer, for example, now you need to tap on the driver button on the bottom of the screen. And then from there, you'll be able to click the eRODS button, which is how you transfer the logs. And from there, you'll need to select web services or email as the transfer mode, and then you'll be able to enter a comment if requested. So typically the officer will give you some information to enter into that comment box. And then once that's done, it's just a matter of clicking the send button in the bottom right-hand portion of the screen.
Another common violation we see roadside is what's known as form and manner violations. This is a catch-all that's used to cite drivers for failing to include all of the required information on their log. Now, the good thing about ELDs is that they will automatically fill in most of the required information on your electronic log, including the name of your carrier, the date, and your mileage, to name a few items. But there are some required fields that you have to fill in manually each day. Notably, these include your shipping number and trailer number, as applicable. It's easy to forget these fields, but doing so will lead to violations during an inspection.
So let's take a look at how to enter required information so you don't end up with a form and manner violation. So here you can see the screen where you will enter this information, and you can see the ones that are listed as required. For example, here we are entering a load ID for this particular load. That's a required field. And then we're moving on to enter the trailer ID, which is another required field. Failing to list those will result in a form and manner violation if you're stopped roadside. Here we're entering a bill of lading number, which we recommend, even though that's not technically required. So you just want to make sure that you enter all of this required information every time you are preparing your log for the day.
If you've been using an ELD for any length of time, you've probably forgotten to log in at some point before taking off down the road. In those cases, you've probably dealt with the issue of unidentified driving time, which describes driving time that is logged by an ELD but is not assigned to any particular driver. This typically occurs when the driver forgets to log in to the device, but can also occur in other circumstances. The regulation says that the drivers and their carriers have an obligation to reconcile all unidentified driving time, meaning that it must be timely assigned to a specific driver so that there's an accurate picture of driving time throughout the day. The good news here is that most ELD platforms make it easy for drivers and carriers to reconcile this time. For example, the ELD devices themselves will automatically prompt drivers to either accept or reject any accumulated unidentified driving time when the drivers subsequently log into the device. If you receive this type of prompt, it's important that you carefully review the time and accept it if it's yours, and reject it if it's not yours. This will then add the time to your logging activity and remove it from the unidentified driving account if you accept it. If you reject it, it will go to the back office, which at that point, your back office administrator will be able to work with the time and assign it to the appropriate driver.
So here we're going to show you how to deal with unidentified driving time. So here is the screen that you'll see. If you have any unidentified driving time on the screen, it will prompt you to deal with it. Here we've got two different unidentified driving events. We're going to accept one and reject one. So here we are accepting one. You could see that we have a couple of options. We can leave it in driving status or indicate that we were in personal conveyance or yard move status. And then we can enter a remark for why it was unidentified to begin with. Here we're just going to indicate that we failed to log in for this particular time, and so that's what led to it being considered unidentified driving time. And then once we have the remark in, it's just a matter of clicking through and confirming this time, and it will prompt you to confirm that this is in fact your time, and it will then be placed on your records of duty status. So now we're going to move on to actually reject one. If this is showing up on your device and it's not yours, then we just click reject, and we can enter a comment for why we are rejecting it. Here we're just going to indicate that this isn't our time, so that is why we are rejecting it. Then we just click save, and that will send the time to the back office to deal with.
Personal conveyance is another issue that can trip drivers up and lead to violations during roadside inspections. Now, personal conveyance can be a prickly subject, and we've covered the details of when drivers can and can't log their time as personal conveyance in another video, so check that out if you haven't seen it. But in this particular video, we're just going to cover the mechanics of properly logging personal conveyance on an ELD system. The most important thing that I want to stress at this point is if you are properly driving in personal conveyance and you end your day in personal conveyance, it is absolutely critical that you end your personal conveyance segment or log out of the device before you power down. If you fail to do that, you're going to end up with a 10-12 hour segment of personal conveyance time that the back office administrator is going to have to deal with. So make sure that you end your personal conveyance segment at the end of your day.
So let's talk about entering and exiting personal conveyance status. So here we're going to enter personal conveyance status by moving our duty status from on duty to off duty, and then you'll see that it gives you the option here to put it in personal conveyance status. From there, you can enter a remark, and we recommend you do this anytime you enter personal conveyance status to indicate what it is exactly that you're doing so that we can verify that the personal conveyance use was proper. Here we're going to indicate that we were operating for our own personal reasons. And then once we do that, we can navigate out of the screen and we will be in personal conveyance status. All right, so let's talk about exiting the status, which again is critical anytime you are getting ready to go off duty. So here we are in personal conveyance status, and we just click over to none to get out of personal conveyance status.
Hey, thanks for watching. We appreciate you joining us. We talked a lot about electronic logging devices and the functionality of them. One other thing to keep in mind is that the regulations do require you to keep a blank supply of driver logs in the truck with you at all times, at least 8 days worth, so that if your electronic logging device malfunctions, you can keep track of your duty status on paper. So be sure you have that with you. Also, if you don't have a copy of your ELD transfer manual electronically, be sure you have a printout of it to keep in the truck as well, so that you can hand that over to law enforcement. That's something that they'll want to see as well. So we appreciate you joining us. We hope you found the information useful. Be sure to check us out at trucksafeconsulting.com. We have a lot of educational material available there, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching.